What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine promotional interview, only to find himself facing off against a host who seems determined to turn the conversation into a personal battleground? Well, you're about to witness one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent memory, where legendary actor Al Pacino found himself in an increasingly heated exchange that would ultimately lead to him walking off set in the middle of a live broadcast. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below letting me know what you think about celebrity interviews gone wrong. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one because what unfolds is absolutely wild. It was supposed to be a simple appearance on The View. Al Pacino, the iconic star of The Godfather, Scarface, and countless other classics, was there to promote his latest project. The veteran actor, now in his 80s, had always been known for his intensity and passion, but also for his professionalism. He'd done thousands of interviews over his decades-long career, navigating everything from serious film discussions to lighthearted talk show banter with equal grace. But this particular morning, something felt different from the moment he walked onto the set. The usual pre-interview pleasantries seemed strained, and there was an undercurrent of tension that the seasoned actor couldn't quite place. Joy Behar, co-host of The View and known for her sharp tongue and political commentary, had apparently decided that this wasn't going to be your typical promotional interview. From the very first question, it was clear she had her own agenda. "So Al," Joy began, leaning forward with what could only be described as a predatory smile, "let's talk about your new film, but first, I have to ask about some of your past work. Looking back, do you ever regret glorifying violence in movies like Scarface? I mean, don't you think Hollywood has a responsibility to society?" Pacino, clearly caught off guard by the aggressive opening, paused for a moment. His eyes narrowed slightly, a telltale sign that those familiar with his work would recognize. "Well, Joy, I think that's a pretty loaded question to start with," he replied, his voice measured but with an edge. "I've always believed that cinema is about exploring the human condition, including its darker aspects. We're storytellers, not moral instructors. But surely you can see how these characters influence young people." Joy pressed on, completely ignoring his thoughtful response. "I mean, how many kids have tried to emulate Tony Montana? Don't you feel any responsibility for that?" The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected the interview to take. Especially not this early. Whoopi Goldberg attempted to interject with a lighter question about his preparation methods, but Joy quickly cut her off. No, let him answer," Joy insisted, waving her hand dismissively at her colleague. "I think this is important. Al, you've made millions off these violent characters. Don't you think you owe society an explanation?" Pacino's jaw tightened. "I don't owe society anything except honest performances," he said, his famous intensity beginning to show. "Every role I've taken, I've approached with respect and dedication. If you want to have a philosophical debate about the nature of art and responsibility, I'm happy to do that, but let's not pretend that's what this is about." "What do you mean by that?" Joy shot back, her voice rising slightly. "I mean, you seem more interested in creating conflict than having a conversation," Pacino replied, his tone becoming more direct. "I've been doing this for over 50 years. I know the difference between an interview and an interrogation." The tension in the studio was now palpable. The camera operators weren't sure where to focus, and the other hosts looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. But Joy Behar was just getting started. "Oh, so now I'm interrogating you." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm asking legitimate questions about your career choices. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be in this business." The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Al Pacino stared at Joy for a long moment, and everyone present could feel the shift in the room. This was no longer just an uncomfortable interview. This was about to become something much more significant. "Listen, lady," Pacino said, his voice low but carrying the weight of decades of experience and respect in the industry. "I've been handling questions about my work since before you had your first job on television. But there's a difference between asking questions and being disrespectful." Joy's face flushed red. "Disrespectful? For asking about the impact of your movies? That's my job, Al. Maybe in your Hollywood bubble, Everyone just tells you how great you are. But out here in the real world, we ask the tough questions. The real world? Pacino's eyebrows shot up. You think sitting behind this desk makes you more connected to the real world than someone who's spent 50 years telling stories about real people, real struggles, real human experiences? I think it makes me someone who's not afraid to call out Hollywood when I see problems, Joy retorted. And I see a lot of problems with the kind of movies you've made your career on. The other hosts were now actively trying to change the subject, with Sarah Haynes jumping in to ask about his upcoming projects. But Joy wasn't having any of it. No, we're going to finish this conversation, Joy declared, cutting off Sarah mid-sentence with a sharp gesture. I'm not done yet. Al, you've been dodging my questions. Pacino's face darkened. I haven't dodged anything. I've answered every question you've asked. But apparently, my answers aren't what you want to hear. Your answers are just Hollywood speak, Joy fired back. Let me ask you something more direct. How do you sleep at night knowing that your portrayal of drug dealers and criminals has probably inspired real violence? How many people have died because they thought being like Tony Montana was cool? The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even for The View, known for its heated discussions, this was crossing a line. Whoopi Goldberg looked mortified, and the producers in the control room were frantically signaling. Pacino leaned back in his chair, but his posture remained tense. That's not just unfair, Joy, that's irresponsible. You're essentially accusing me of being responsible for violence I had nothing to do with. That's not journalism, that's character assassination. Oh, so now I'm assassinating your character? Joy laughed bitterly. I'm asking you to take responsibility for the influence your work has had. But I guess that's too much to ask from someone who's been living in an ivory tower for decades. Ivory tower? Pacino's voice rose for the first time, his legendary temper beginning to show. Lady, I grew up in the Bronx. I know what real violence looks like, and it's not something I take lightly or glorify. Every character I've played has consequences. Every story has meaning. If you can't see that, then you don't understand what you're talking about. Don't you dare lecture me about understanding, Joy snapped, pointing her finger at him. I've been covering real news while you've been playing pretend for money. I know what real violence is too, and I know that movies like yours contribute to it. The other hosts were now actively trying to salvage the situation. Sonny Hostin attempted to redirect with a question about his acting process, but Joy immediately shut her down. We're having an important conversation here, Joy said without taking her eyes off Pacino. This is exactly the kind of discussion we should be having with Hollywood elite who think they're above criticism. Above criticism? Pacino's voice carried a dangerous edge now. I've been criticized my entire career, and I've learned from it. But there's a difference between criticism and whatever this island. You came into this interview with an agenda, and you're not interested in anything I have to say. My agenda is holding powerful men accountable, Joy declared, as if she were delivering a speech rather than having a conversation. Something that apparently doesn't happen enough in your world. My world? Pacino stood up slightly in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. You don't know anything about my world. You don't know about the years of struggling, the dedication to craft, the respect I have for the art form and the audience. You've decided who I am before I even opened my mouth. I've decided based on 50 years of your movies, Joy shot back. And what I see is someone who's made a fortune glorifying everything that's wrong with masculinity in this country. The studio had gone completely silent, except for the soft whir of cameras. Even the crew members had stopped what they were doing to watch this unprecedented meltdown unfold. Pacino slowly shook his head, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with barely contained fury. You know what, Joy? In all my years in this business, I've met a lot of people. Some good, some bad, some just trying to do their job. But I've rarely met someone so determined to tear down another person for no reason other than their own ego. My ego? Joy's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. This isn't about ego. This is about accountability. Something your generation clearly doesn't understand. My generation? Pacino's eyes flashed. My generation built the industry you're sitting in right now, benefiting from. We created the stories, took the risks, paved the way for everyone who came after. And you want to sit there and lecture me about accountability? Yes, I do, Joy said defiantly. Because someone needs to. Someone needs to ask the hard questions that all those Hollywood reporters are too starstruck to ask. Hard questions? Pacino laughed, but it was a cold, humorless sound. You think ambushing someone and making wild accusations about them being responsible for violence is asking hard questions? That's not journalism, Joy. That's just being mean-spirited. Alyssa Farah Griffin tried once more to interject with a comment about his charitable work, but Joy was relentless. Don't try to change the subject. She snapped at her colleague before turning back to Pacino. We're talking about the impact of violent entertainment. And I want to know why Al Pacino thinks he gets a pass. I don't want a pass, Pacino said, his voice rising again. I want a fair conversation. But that's clearly not what you're interested in. You've made up your mind about who I am and what I represent, and nothing I say is going to change that. Maybe because what you represent is everything that's wrong with Hollywood. Joy continued her assault. The old boys club, the violence, the toxic masculinity, all wrapped up in awards and accolades. Pacino stared at her for a long moment, and everyone in the studio could see him making a decision. His face had gone from angry to something else entirely. Something that looked almost like pity. You know what, Joy? He said finally, his voice now eerily calm. I came here today to talk about my work, to connect with the audience, maybe have some fun. I've done thousands of interviews, and I've always tried to be respectful, even when the questions were challenging. But this isn't an interview anymore. This is what happens when someone gets called out and doesn't like it, Joy said with a smug smile, clearly thinking she had won some kind of victory. This is exactly the kind of entitled behavior I was talking about. Pacino's expression shifted to something the other hosts had never seen before. It was the look of a man who had finally reached his breaking point, not with anger, but with profound disappointment. Entitled, he repeated slowly, as if testing the word. Joy, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I have spent my entire life dedicated to my craft. I've studied every character. I've lived with them. I've brought truth to every role I've ever played. I've never asked for special treatment, never demanded softball questions, never refused to talk about difficult subjects. But what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's harassment. Harassment? Joy scoffed. For asking you about your movies? Give me a break, Al. This is exactly what I mean about Hollywood privilege. The minute someone asks you a real question, you cry, harassment. A real question? Pacino's voice was getting quieter, which somehow made it more intense. Let me tell you what a real question would be. You could have asked me about my process, about how I approach difficult characters, about the responsibility I feel as an actor, about how I've evolved over the decades. Instead, you decided to attack me personally and blame me for societal problems I had nothing to do with. The other hosts exchanged desperate looks. Whoopi Goldberg made one more attempt to salvage the situation. Al, maybe we could talk about your new project, she said hopefully. But Joy immediately cut her off again. No, we're not moving on. I want Al to answer the question. Do you, or do you not think your violent movies have had a negative impact on society? Pacino closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, there was a resigned sadness there. You really want an answer to that question? Yes, I do, Joy said triumphantly. Then here's your answer. I think art, real art, holds up a mirror to society. Sometimes that mirror shows us things we don't want to see. The characters I've played, they're not heroes, they're cautionary tales. Tony Montana doesn't end up happy, Joy. He ends up dead and alone. Michael Corleone doesn't find peace, he finds emptiness. These aren't glamorous endings, these are tragedies. But people don't see them that way, Joy interrupted. Some people don't, Pacino acknowledged. But that's not the fault of the art. That's the fault of people who choose to miss the point. Should we stop telling stories about difficult subjects because some people might misunderstand them? Should we only make movies about puppies and rainbows? Don't be ridiculous, Joy shot back. I'm not being ridiculous, Joy. You are. You're asking me to take responsibility for how other people choose to interpret my work. That's like blaming Shakespeare for every murder committed by someone who read Macbeth. Joy's face was getting redder by the minute. Don't compare yourself to Shakespeare. That's exactly the kind of arrogance I'm talking about. I'm not comparing myself to Shakespeare, Pacino said with forced patience. I'm making a point about artistic responsibility. But you're not interested in understanding that point. You just want to attack. I want honesty, Joy declared. Something that seems to be in short supply from Hollywood these days. Honesty? Pacino's voice finally began to rise again. You want honesty? Here's some honesty for you, Joy. This is the most unprofessional interview I've ever been part of. I've been treated with more respect by paparazzi outside restaurants than I'm being treated here today. Oh, boo-hoo, Joy mocked. The big movie star isn't getting treated like royalty. Welcome to the real world, Al. That was it. That was the moment everyone in the studio knew things had gone too far. Pacino stood up slowly from his chair, and the movement seemed to suck all the air out of the room. You know what, Joy? He said, his voice now completely calm and controlled. I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've worked with the greatest directors, the greatest actors, the greatest writers of multiple generations. I've been criticized by people who actually know what they're talking about, and I've learned from every single one of them. But I've never, and I mean never, been treated with such disrespect by someone who claims to be a professional. If you can't handle the heat, Joy started to say, but Pacino held up his hand. No. You're done talking. I listened to you. Now you listen to me. I came here as a guest on your show. I came here with respect for this program and for the audience who watches it. I came here prepared to have a real conversation about my work, my life, my experiences. Instead, you decided to use me as a punching bag for whatever personal issues you have with the entertainment industry. The studio was dead silent. Even Joy seemed momentarily stunned by the controlled intensity in his voice. I don't know what happened in your life to make you this angry, Pacino continued. And frankly, I don't care. But I'm not going to sit here and let you take it out on me. I've been nothing but professional, and you've been nothing but hostile, and I'm done with it. Joy finally found her voice again. So you're just going to run away? Just like every other Hollywood prima donna who can't handle criticism? Pacino actually smiled at that, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. Criticism? Is that what you call this? Joy, I've been criticized by some of the smartest, most talented people in the world, and I've always appreciated it because it made me better. But this isn't criticism. This is just mean. And life's too short to waste time on mean people. He began to remove his microphone, and panic set in among the crew and producers. Al, please, Whoopi Goldberg pleaded. Don't go, we can start over. Pacino looked at Whoopi with genuine affection. Whoopi, you're a class act. You always have been. But I can't do this anymore. I won't do this anymore. Joy, perhaps realizing that she had pushed too far, made one last attempt to maintain control. Fine. Go ahead and leave. Show everyone what you're really made of. Pacino paused in removing his microphone and looked directly at Joy one final time. You want to know what I'm really made of? I'm made of 50 years of hard work, dedication, and respect for my craft and my colleagues. I'm made of thousands of hours studying, preparing, and giving everything I have to every role. I'm made of genuine love for storytelling and for the people who watch our movies. And I'm made of enough self-respect to know when it's time to walk away from someone who doesn't deserve another second of my time. With that, he handed his microphone to a stunned production assistant and began to walk toward the exit. This is live television, Al, Joy called after him desperately. You can't just leave. Pacino stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one last time. Watch me. And with that, one of the most respected actors in Hollywood history walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, mortified co-hosts, and one very red-faced Joy Behar who had just experienced what happens when you push a legend too far. The cameras kept rolling as the remaining hosts tried desperately to fill the dead air, but nothing they could say would take away from what viewers had just witnessed. A masterclass in dignity under fire, and a reminder that respect is something that should be given freely, not something that has to be demanded.